Says that I'm live. Beautiful. Cool. Alrighty. Good morning, everybody, or whenever you are watching this. Today I want to talk about mindfulness and meditation. A lot of the work that we have done in the program is all based on mindfulness. And even though I didn't necessarily talk about it in that way, we didn't sit down and do mindful breathing or meditation or anything like that. For some of you, I did do some meditation as we're moving through into some of the quantum meditations. However, all of the work that we had been doing, even from day one, where you are not your mind, your mind's a part of you, to looking for gratitude, becoming grateful for discomfort, pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. Everything that we've been doing is based on mindfulness. And I wanted to present it to you through the program without letting you know that we were doing mindfulness. It was more so just a process of noticing, okay, notice this, watch out for this, reflect on that, bring it back to me, that sort of stuff. So we did mindfulness without talking about mindfulness, and sometimes I think that's probably the best way to practice mindfulness, because we can get caught up in our heads when we talk about mindfulness. So, what is mindfulness? Mindfulness is an awareness skill. It's very cliche at the moment. There's so many apps that are mindful apps. Mindfulness-based things, there's mindfulness-based therapies, mindfulness-based yoga, mindfulness-based whatever it is, it's going to be mindfulness-based. To the point where now mindfulness is a commodity. So I also wanted to express to you today how mindfulness can be helpful, but how also it can actually cause harm as well. And this is something that we don't necessarily hear about within the wellness industry and contemplative practices. It's really sold as something that is so wonderful that once you do it, then it's going to change your life. And to a certain degree it does. It does have some wonderful benefits to it, and you can experience a different perspective shift from it. But we'll talk about that. And then I want to talk to you about meditation. So it's something that we didn't necessarily go over within the program. However, it's something that is very significant within life to make a practice, to make a regular practice in your daily life, that you can use mindfulness and meditation, and you can use mindfulness meditation. And it doesn't necessarily have to be 15, 20 minutes, half an hour meditations. One thing that I've been doing a lot lately is what I call meditation microdosing, where it's 30 seconds. I know that sounds a bit counterintuitive in relation to meditation, but I find that it yields some really significant results. So we'll talk about that. But let's start with mindfulness. So mindfulness is an awareness skill. It's an awareness skill, so I place particular attention on something particular in a particular way. Okay. So the particular attention is an observation. I'm just becoming aware, so the attention is awareness. Something particular is whatever it is, the object. If I go for a walk, it might be the breeze as it caresses my skin. It might be the sound of birds. It might be the sound of me stepping over leaves. It might be the pattern of how my feet hit the ground, to heel the toe. Is it midfoot, that sort of thing. It might be I am very much aware of my words. I'm mindful of my words when I'm around particular people and when I'm trying to convey a particular message. I'm mindful of my thoughts in relation to particular things that I might see on the news or in a conversation. I'm mindful of the emotions that are arising within me. What are these feelings that are arising within me? So notice I'm using the word notice. Notice is, and so you'll start to use a particular vocabulary when we're talking about mindfulness. So I'm mindful of my thoughts and where I want to guide you to at this moment in time. So I'm mindful of reacting, and I'm also mindful of responding. So where do I sit within that? I had a situation this morning where I'd driven out in front of somebody. There was enough room for that person to see what was going on. It was fairly safe. But the gentleman behind me on his moped had some words to say about it, and so he was quite aroused in a sense, and he was going off at me basically. But I was sitting in the car, and I could have reacted by rolling down the window and doing that or giving some back to him. But I was really mindful in where I was and what was going on to me, and I just waved in a sense, apologised to a gesture in that way, but he kept on going. So then I started to notice the arisings of emotions were really related to thoughts, and the thoughts were I've done anything, I've upset somebody, which goes back to my old patterns of wanting to be the people pleaser, that sort of thing. So I was noticing these emotions coming up, and then I was also noticing how I was then getting caught up in his dialogue and his point of reference and his point of attraction. And then I then started to notice that I was buying into his perspective and really feeling down on myself and feeling bad about myself. But then I thought, wow, this is really interesting, because I followed the path of the mantra of I wonder what life will place upon my path today that will bring me to a greater awareness of self and others. So in a sense, this gentleman was the path of least resistance for me to see some of the old scripts that I would continue to use. I was also the path of least resistance for him to see old scripts that he was continuing to use. Did he see it from that perspective? Probably not, because he was continuing to berate me as he was riding his moped behind me. And through that, then I thought, okay. And the guy, I turned off, and the guy kept on going. And I thought, at that moment, I can put down my script that I was buying into that was, in a sense, decreasing my frequency or lowering my frequency, and continue to buy into what I thought he was thinking about me, which I had no idea. Or I could look at it and go, okay, that has happened, there was no harm that was actually caused there. Do I stay attached to that moment, or do I continue on throughout my day? Because it's the beginning of my day, I really don't want to spoil my day. For that gentleman, he could have continued to activate those energies and those emotions and those thoughts within him, and continue to go to work and then basically blame something external to you for how you're feeling. So it was really interesting. So I used mindfulness in that space, and there was lots of arising, noticing, reacting, responding, coming to an understanding that I can only experience my life and my experience. What am I inviting in? Am I taking hold of somebody else's, script, story, point of attraction, point of reference, or what is my point of reference and point of attraction right here, right now? So that's another thing within mindfulness, is that it's the noticing of the moment. So I've got this awareness, noticing particular things in the moment. Now, there's one key factor within mindfulness that, in a sense, separates it or identifies it in a particular way, and that is that it comes from a non-judgmental perspective. Now, this is the key, and this is quite counterintuitive to how the mind naturally works. And it naturally works through judging things. That's good, that's bad, that's right, that's wrong, safe, threat, opportunity, whatever it is. So for awareness to look at something through the eyes of non-judgment that's quite a challenge. So that's where we can then really say, I'm not using a particular part of my mind to become mindful. I'm using another part of my mind. I'm also using the perspective of the observer. And the observer comes from a state of awareness. So awareness is not a thinking process. Awareness is more so a being process. Awareness does not have any judgment on anything. Awareness is just watching. And in the mindfulness community, we talk about it from a space of curiosity. If you were a researcher, I like the word curiosity because I'm curious about things. I'm not judging it in any way. When I look at it from the perspective of being curious, I come from the perspective where I am neutral in nature rather than I have a bias. The mind, or a particular part of the mind, and for those of you who remember the reptilian part of the brain, it will look at things from a particular bias, and that's through fear, threat, or opportunity. So we're looking at it from the perspective of a neutral space. And life, in essence, is neutral as well. So here we are, and we've had these conversations that you are consciousness having a human experience. So it's awareness that comes from consciousness. So I'm now looking at my experience, the arising within the mind-body. So we have a mind-body complex, but we also have a spirit-mind-body complex. So there's three components. Christians would talk about it as the Holy Trinity. But it's more so about understanding that you are this awareness, and you're watching how the mind is trying to make sense of your environment. That's all it is. It doesn't mean that it's a bad mind or anything like that. It's just trying to make sense. And as it tries to make sense, it will then put things into categories, it will judge things, put things into boxes, tie it off so it's neatly going, well, this is how it looks here, and that's how it looks there. So this mindfulness awareness, in a sense, another word that we could use is watchfulness rather than mindfulness, because the mindfulness suggests that there's a thinking process, whereas it's more so with watchfulness. And you go, well, where do I watch from? You watch from awareness. It's like, at the moment, I'm talking about mindfulness, I'm talking about particular experiences, and as I've spoken about this, and for those of you who are watching now, and those of you who will watch this later, up until this time, where I will now introduce this thought to you, you haven't necessarily thought about your breathing. But now I've introduced the concept of breathing, now you're actually noticing your breathing. So see how you notice your breathing. Now there's an awareness of that. Now it's a conscious awareness, and this is another part of mindfulness. It's a conscious awareness. It's not an autopilot. It's the conscious awareness of something. So can you look at your breathing from a non-judgmental perspective? Can you just notice your breathing? And see, now I'm consciously aware of it. I'm, in essence, impacting how I'm breathing. That's fine. Do I have thoughts around it, though? Should I be breathing deeply into it? How does my stomach feel at the moment? I hope nobody's watching me. See the thoughts that can arise from that. So that mindfulness is then noticing the thoughts that arise from it, because remember, you are not your thoughts, you are the one who observes your thoughts, but your thoughts are still a part of you. So your breathing, your lungs, your heart, the way that oxygen gets shared throughout your body is part of your autonomic nervous system. It's continuing to do this each and every day until the day you die. Up until the point where I brought you to the attention of your breathing, it was just continuing to go unaccounted for, in a sense, under the radar. It didn't even realise it. When we then put our attention on it, then we started to become aware of it. Now, was I mindful of it? Could I place awareness on my breath without judging it? Or did I judge it? And if I did judge it, was I aware that I did judge it? So that's the same as I've now placing my non-judgmental awareness on my thoughts, my non-judgmental awareness on my arising. So in those moments when the guy was berating me behind me, I was noticing these emotions coming up. Now I also knew, from the work that we've done, is that your thoughts activate an emotion. By the time that you've had an emotion, you've had a series of thoughts. You cannot have an emotion without having a thought attached to it. So it was interesting. I felt the emotion, and then I was able to then shift it back up and go, what were the thoughts that were related to that? Once again, when I ask any question that is related to self-inquiry, it begins or it exists within the prefrontal cortex. That's part of the responsive mode. So as I was becoming aware of that, I then started to realise that these thoughts were old patterns of thinking. Even though, yes, there was the reality that potentially I did cut in front of this guy, I could have, frightened him, I could have shocked him or anything like that, but it was a safe passage. The response that he, or the reaction that he was giving me, was not appropriate to the actual environment. So I could feel safe within that process and going, okay, I do need to be more aware, but this response that's coming from you says more about you than it does about me. So how people talk about you says more about them than it does you. How you respond to them says more about you than it does about them. So in that moment, I was able to respond to his reactions, and he continued to react. But I didn't necessarily want to buy into that. There was a part of me, though, that was coming up and saying, here you go again, guilty, 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 guilty. Old script from way back. So that was interesting for me to then go, wow, this is really interesting. I'm still sitting with those old scripts. Now, for some of you, a couple of weeks ago I spoke about the emotional guidance system. I think even last week I spoke to you around manifesting. It might have even been step 5, where we get these opportunities to see, keep or delete old patterns of thinking. So today was an opportunity for me to either keep or delete. So my mind was just letting me know, hey, there's still some stuff here. Do you want us to keep it? Do you want us to delete it? And in that moment, I bought into it, but then I recognised it. I became aware of it, and that's when I then said, this doesn't serve me anymore. Let's get rid of it. Let's replace it with this stuff. And then I was able to move on through my day. Now, the mantra that I say, I wonder what life will pass upon my path today that will bring me to a greater awareness of self and others. I looked at that interaction this morning, and I was able to come to many realisations around it. Yes, I do need to be more mindful of people when I'm driving and things like that. But more so that I could have easily got caught up in becoming the victim and made that person the perpetrator. Because in that moment, I was the perpetrator for that gentleman. And he then became the victim. And he was quite happy in telling me, well, I don't know if he was happy, but he was quite vocal in telling me how much of a victim he was. So even in that circumstance there, that was also letting me know that, is there still a part of the victimhood that exists within you? There's so much that we can learn about ourselves from each and every interaction. For the person who is not in the moment, for the person who doesn't practice mindfulness, for the person who doesn't understand these concepts that we've been working with, they could have easily looked at that experience and thought to themselves, I want to forget about that because it brought up a lot of bad energy or bad emotions. I thought that I was a bad person. Or I'm naturally going to shift it away from myself and project it back to them and go, well, mate, you're an idiot for doing that. Just settle down. What an angry man you are. Whatever it was. So, but from that one moment, there was so much that I could take from it. And I can be grateful for that man for berating me and reacting towards me in that particular situation, because it allowed me to see so many parts of myself. It allowed me to become aware of what it was that I needed to place attention on, what I needed attending to, what scripts I still had that I could then keep or delete and then replace with new scripts. what projections that I had within myself that I continued to hold on to that weren't serving me, what I needed to heal within myself. Really, really powerful stuff. And that's what mindfulness is in relation to what we have been doing. Because we're just noticing stuff as it arises, but we're noticing it from a non-judgmental perspective. Using the concepts that we've spoken about and the models that we've used, I can then use that mindfulness as that point of awareness to then have a greater understanding of how I and life are actually connected. And everything that is being placed upon my path each and every day, I have been a part of. I've invited that. How it gets placed upon my path, I have no idea. Remember the universal Tinder situation from last week. If you haven't seen the one from last week, I strongly recommend that you go and check that out. Okay? All right. I'm just looking at the time, being mindful of the time, of course. Meditation. So briefly just wanted to talk to you about meditation. So a lot of people will use meditation as guided meditations, as sitting meditations, as standing, as walking, as active, lots of meditation apps. People will engage in meditation for 5 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, hours. The Buddhist monks will sit for 6 hours in meditation each day. But what is meditation? So really, I do run a course I run a couple of courses. There's the mindfulness meditation one that I do with mindfulness work, which is really an introduction. It's quite, it's a nice group meditation. I also run one called the Essence of Meditation. Very much a smaller group, more interactive. We're doing a microdosing meditation within that. Go in, we breathe, we notice what's arising through different scripts or questions that I'll get you to do. Meditation, in essence, is about knowing thyself, because there's so much time that we have within our lives on this planet that we don't spend with ourselves at all. We busy ourselves with things to do, places to go, events to attend, conversations with others, projecting away from self. So I noticed today that I could have easily projected away from myself, but I was more so attending to myself. So the essence of meditation is to know thyself, and you can know thyself in so many ways. I use the analogy of taking my meditation off the cushion and taking it into life. Now, in saying that, I still need to become aware of what is my meditation on the cushion, and what does that represent to me, and how would it help in my life. So when we look at meditation, we have the sitting meditation. And for many, many years, I spent a lot of time in active meditation. I'd be mindful, and I could be very aware of things around me. And I didn't necessarily see the value in sitting in meditation. I thought I was pretty aware. When I started to sit in meditation, that's when things really started to open up for me. Because the thing is, when you're sitting, you're closing your eyes, and you are left, in essence, alone with yourself, with your thoughts, with the arisings, with the body sensations, with the musings of the mind. So you get to notice more where you go, or more so what you invite into your moments when you close your eyes and you go into meditation. Now, a lot of people think that meditation is about not thinking, not having any thoughts, achieving enlightenment and nirvana and bliss. For most people, that is not the case. I will say that I have achieved those things on a momentary scale, and I am aware of that place and where it exists within me, so I can then go to that place consciously, and then I can then take that place with me off the cushion and into life. That's the benefit of meditation. I was very fortunate to have a really good grasp on meditation, and it came to me quite easily. However, for some people, it can be quite alarming, noisy, and they can feel as though they're not doing the right thing and get quite discouraged and then move away from it. So I would just suggest that, and through the microdosing meditation, I find that a very simple one to do, and you know, I can talk about meditation, but I'm just speaking with words. I can talk about mindfulness, but once again, I'm just sharing words. Mindfulness, the way that you experience it is to experience it. Same with meditation. So what I can suggest is to do a couple of meditations, and they only need to be 30 seconds to a minute, probably a minute, would be a good start. But to sit comfortably in a quiet space, allocate time, so you're quarantining time for yourself, so there's a bit of self-love straight away. So a lot of this is around your intention. Go into the meditation in wanting to find yourself. Not that we know what that is, but the question is, I'd really like to find a particular part of myself that I haven't found before. And one of the beginning meditations that we do in the essence of meditation is to find silence. Find that silence within you. So what I would suggest to you, and we've got this video now so you can go back and think about it, you can even write this down, is to sit in meditation, close your eyes, do a breathing process, and whenever we breathe, and there's lots of ways to breathe within meditation, but if we breathe in through the nose, into the diaphragm, and then out through the mouth. I usually do it on the count of in for 3, hold for 2, and then out for 2. So that's it. And even through that breathing process, you're going to stimulate the vagus nerve, it will decrease your heart rate, it will bring you into a sense of calm. You fill up your lower lobes with oxygen, which allows all 3 lobes to be filled. More oxygen is going to be permeating through your cells, and more oxygen is going to be up here into your mind as well. So it's this breathing process, and then set a bit of a timer, give yourself a minute to search for silence. Now, for some of you, you will be able to find it quite easily. For others, it might be a bit of a stretch, and for others, it might even happen. But that's okay. So it's about noticing what is happening for you. Once again, there's the mindfulness part of it. Also, to lower our expectations, that I don't go into meditation and I do it for 5 days, for 5 minutes a day, and expect to have nirvana at the end of that 5 days. There is some Buddhist monasteries in the world where an adept or a monk will go in there, and they will learn the scriptures, they will learn the teachings and the philosophies for the first 10 years before they then are asked to meditate, invited to meditate. So here's 10 years of training before you go into meditation. So once again, the West likes to commoditize things. Let's go and do some meditation. And in actual fact, this is something that you need to practice. It's a bit like going to Commonwealth Games to represent the country. That's what true meditation is about. Now, in saying that, that's only one perspective of it. And this is where I think that we really need to become aware of the hustle and bustle of the life that we're in. And sometimes for people to allocate more than 20 minutes, 30 minutes for themselves is a fast stretch. Imagine if you could just do that within 5 minutes. Imagine if you could do it in 30-second intervals, 1 minute intervals. So I would invite you to consider the first question, looking for silence, noticing what's arising. In the noticing of what's arising, see if you can see it from the mindfulness perspective of non-judgment. That'll be the change. So there's even within that process, you go, Maurice, I didn't find any silence. Okay, that's fine. What did you find out? And what you found was what you needed to know right there and then. That's the essence of meditation, is to know thyself. It's not to detach from the world. It's not to depersonalize. It's not to disassociate, which we find happens quite a bit within meditation. It's more so to come closer to yourself. That's probably the best way to describe it. Yeah. There's a lot of other stuff that I'd like to share with you on meditation, but that probably takes another session, and it's probably best to come and see me personally. So, today we spoke about mindfulness and meditation. We also looked at mindfulness, what it actually is, what it isn't, how we can use it through the concepts that we've spoken about, and how we can then use it in meditation. I think mindfulness is a really great skill to become aware of before you go into meditation, because otherwise, if you go to meditation without having an understanding of what mindfulness is, you will judge a lot of the thoughts, a lot of the arisings that happen for you within meditation. Whereas when you become mindful of the thoughts and the arisings, then you are more likely to see the greater value in that experience than if you weren't aware of it. It's probably a good way of looking at it. So one last thing, in relation to mindfulness, how it can be detrimental. It can be detrimental for people who have had significant trauma in the past, and their safety mechanism, in a sense, is depersonalisation, where they try to, but they naturally gravitate to moving away from it and not feeling the memories and the emotions related to the trauma. If I'm going to ask someone to be mindful and become, move closer to the arisings of the trauma, that can cause more harm than good. So this is where we need to be aware of, okay, what have you experienced in the past? And you can still use mindfulness in the perspective of working with that, but there's other conversations that need to happen around that as well. This is something that we will talk about on the 26th of September, the relationships workshop that we're going to do, because we'll look at polyvagal theory and mindfulness and moving towards that. And we'll also be doing some different meditations on that day. We've got a young man coming in to open the day with doing some qigong, do some breath work, and we'll probably also do some yin yoga by the end of the day as well. So it'll be a really nice top on the tail and connecting. Beautiful day, beautiful day. There's some of those who may be interested in that and who aren't already coming, can let me know, and I can give you the details for that. But that would be on the 26th of September, at the Calmness Centre. Now we're going to have it at the Calmness Centre. I was going to have it here at the practice, but just with my mum and her wanderings throughout the day, I thought it would be best if we had a nice space that we could spread out and got the outdoors ready for okay. Thank you for those who are watching now. Thank you for those who then watch later as well. Hopefully that conversation has brought some, I guess, more awareness to the work that we've done in the past, and to also remind you of how you can use different models within each other as you move through the days. Okay. If you have any questions, throw a comment in there, and then I can get back to you around that as well too. I will download this video, and it will be on the YouTube site. I'll put the link to that, which will have all of these videos listed for this program. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Have a beautiful day. I will see you next time.